Hello and welcome to the Property Roundup here on iPropertyRadio with myself, Carol Tallon, the show where we chat to industry experts to get a view on activity on the ground and to learn about new trends emerging. This show is sponsored by daft.ie, Ireland's most visited property website. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Walter Mythen of O'Farrell Cleere Estate Agents in Malahide. Walter, you're very welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
No problem. Thank you, Carol. Thank you for having me.
And as mentioned in the intro there, you're with O'Farrell Cleere Estate Agents in Malahide, probably one of Ireland's longest established estate agents, so certainly a very well-known brand in North Dublin. You might just talk to us about the Malahide property market. How was 2023 for your buyers and sellers?
Yeah, I mean, as you're probably reading, and many of your listeners will know, it's been a very, very busy year in terms of demand. Unfortunately, the supply isn't meeting that demand. And again, I think everybody's aware of that and the problems that brings. But in terms of acting on the vendor side and the client side, it's been very, very successful in terms of prices being achieved. Very, very strong. Obviously, there's different categories within that, within the market here. But overall, it's been extremely strong with huge activity on the buyer side for sure.
And is that activity focused primarily on the second-hand market?
Yeah, I mean it is. Land is in short supply in Malahide in particular, but we have an amazing scheme that Ballymore are currently building up in Cement Rise, and that's a nice mix of kind of 3-4 beds, semi-detached, detached, and then 2 apartment blocks as well with a facility block, which is unique to the area from the residential sale point of view anyway, and it's been a huge success so far. So. Yeah, there's been a good mix, but everything is doing well. Certain categories are definitely busier than others. The 3 and 4 bedroom semi-detached within kind of 10 walking minutes of schools and that sort of thing is in huge demand, and that's where you're seeing frantic bidding and a lot of competition. So yeah, it's tricky in that field. If you're looking to buy, you need to be really prepared. In many cases, we're spoilt out here where, chains aren't the norm, which they would have been, where you'd have to sell to buy. Now, a lot of buyers are ready to go and either cash or have already sold and renting short term or back in with the parents or in-laws. So it's, you have to be kind of fight ready to get involved because it is so competitive. When you might have, 10, 12 bids, it's going to come down in many cases to who's further progressed in their end and has the money kind of sitting there ready to go or mortgage approved and ready to go.
It's really interesting that you position it as fight ready, because unfortunately that's exactly how home buyers feel. So whether they're first time buyers or those trading up or down. And I absolutely want to talk to you about the pipeline of supply, whether it's through the second hand homes or indeed new homes. But you've touched on a few really interesting things there. Let's focus for a moment on the demand. So it's interesting to hear that actually Malahide is not impacted by the chains that we see in so many places across the country. So let's talk about that for a moment. When I hear of no chains, I usually think first time buyer, but I hear you say people are moving back in with in-laws and renting temporarily. That's not an option in other places in the country. So talk to me about the home buyers that you're talking to, whether they're first time buyers or those looking to trade up or down.
Yeah, like at the first time buyer end, once they have their mortgage approval, which can be a tedious enough process at the moment, but once they have that, then they're obviously sitting pretty in terms of being ready to go. It's a tricky one where, say, you might have someone looking to buy, they're in a 3-bedroom home with maybe 1 or 2 children, and they're very nervous for obvious reasons about what to do next. They are like, well, we need more space. We might be expanding family. We're working from home at the moment, so we need the extra, bedroom or extra living space. But what do they do? In order to stand a chance, they do have to go to market first and then hope that they get some activity on their own sale, get that sale agreed. And then in reality, that's what I'm telling people. Then you start looking, because if you're chasing your tail, if you see something you like, then you go put your house on the market. By the time it's photographed and up and running, which can happen quickly, chances are there's already bids in from ready to go purchasers. So you continuously lose out. So you do find people who will come back to me and say, Walter, listen, what you told us maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 months ago was spot on. We weren't ready at the time, but we've put the house on the market now. So we're sale agreed. So, and then they're in a different place altogether when they go to bid. So it is very cutthroat like that. And it's the ones who are kind of stuck waiting for the perfect house before they put their own on. The penny, unfortunately, will drop with them eventually, but it's hard. I totally get it. I mean, you don't know where you're going to go. If you've got kids, will they be in the same school? All of those things, or, you know, even just a colossal waste of time. But more times than not, it does work out. I would say 90% of the time, a plan comes together, and that can be, even if they get their own house and they get a great price, which they will at the moment, they'll figure something out. It's amazing how things come their way. A friend's house comes available that they can go into for short term. But if they're committed to it, they'll do it. If they're 50-50 or sitting on the fence about moving, or will we or won't we, it's too aggressive out there, and it'll fall away on them. So the biggest decision I'm telling all the clients is, if you really want to move, you got to make it happen. And they tend to be successful in that. But yeah, it's the ones who are kind of thinking, will we do it? Will we not do it? If they go tomorrow, it's unlikely that they'll get it. It's just, you know, too hot out there.
It never feels like a convenient time to be selling and buying and these things, you know, in theory. And look, years ago, I mean, certainly, you know, 15, 20 years ago, it was always the norm that, you know, you always had the option of renting for 3 months, 6 months, and that's just not the case anymore. What is the rental market like in terms of being able to accommodate the market in Malahide right now?
There isn't really. I mean, I've never seen such a short supply of rental. A lot of our clients are selling up, as you, again, the market will know. It's just become a bit onerous to be a landlord. It's almost like it's a dirty word at the minute, which is terrible, because it's a necessity even for situations like you've just mentioned. But to try and get involved in that, and also, you know, if you're paying for, you know, 3,000 or 4,000 a month for a kind of a typical 3 or 4 bed semi-detached, if you're paying out 4,000 a month for 6 months or 8 months or 12, it's a huge amount of money coming off your saving that you have for the house. So people are worried about that. Will they get caught in a situation where so it is difficult, but it's doable. You just have to be prepared to be fluid and do what you need to do to make it happen. And that's what I'm saying. If you're fully committed to it, 9 times out of 10, it will work out. It might take time. Something will come your way in terms of a rental or short-term situation. And some sellers as well, particularly first-time buyers, are, you know, it's not ideal for them, but they're okay to wait a bit more. So if the seller needs another month or two, then that's okay for the most part, because supply is so short. They're just happy you've won the sale and got the house. So if they have to wait a little bit of time, they'll do that. They're already in rental or at home. So yeah, it really just depends.
You know, there are times like this that I think actually the art of communication, you know, in terms of negotiation, we always used to talk about negotiation is about so much more than the price. It is about understanding the situation both parties are in and trying to accommodate as best. You know, Walter, I unfortunately, I think I know the answer to this before I ask it, but I want to ask it anyway. Are you seeing any buy-to-let investors coming into the market?
Very few. Really small numbers. I've had some good success up in Cement Rise, again, that we mentioned earlier. We've had a few buy-to-let, but only a few. And it's a slightly different buy-to-let. It's with a view to possibly for them in the future, or for kids. So it's not a hardcore investor who's coming on looking at yield and that's all they're interested in. Very, very few of those on the ground. They may be a couple in their 50s or 60s who are thinking, right, in 10, 15, 20 years time, we want something like this to retire into and sell the family home, and it's something that's kind of high end. And again, with the facilities up there in particular, it's been a huge success. It's just, and that's a very interesting dynamic in the market here at the moment. The average apartment, for example, unless the price is very attractive, isn't gathering the interest. The higher end stuff is by far the busiest, and what sells first, which is interesting, because I spent about 10 years in London. And when you would launch over there, you'd normally find the investors coming in and asking, right, what's the entry level here? I'll take it because it's based on the yield and they're looking at it differently. Here it's like, right, we're buying as an investment now. What's the best apartment that you have? Because in 10, 15, 20 years time or whatever it is, that's where we're going to live. So they're going big on the more expensive premium units as opposed to the lower entry level stock. So it's interesting.
Yeah, that is particularly interesting. Are they presenting as cash buyers? Are they raising some finance? Are they buying through pensions?
No, mostly. Again, we're fortunate in this neck of the woods. Most of our sales, over 80%, I would say, of people downsizing, would be cash buyers. Now, they will sell in turn. So we have a mix of people within there, which is very, very important to the market here. Because if they've got a 4-bedroom detached family home that the kids are gone, that 4-bed detached is so sought after at the moment. So when they will eventually move into the apartment, that frees up the 4-bed. That in turn probably frees up a 3-bed, and the whole cycle takes off. When you take one piece of that jigsaw away, the whole thing comes to a standstill, and we're noticing a massive level of interest for high-end downsizing apartments, and that's again why I think Ballymore nailed it in terms of their approach to the scheme there, because it's ticking those boxes. It's not just an apartment where, for someone to come from a family home with space and a garden, there needs to be something to attract them there. And a standard apartment that might be a bit dark or has no outside facilities, it's a bit of a concrete situation. It's too dramatic a difference for them. Whereas with Seamount, for just using as an example, because we're working on it, it has a 13-acre park behind it. It's got a gym. It's got a cinema. It's got a lounge lobby area. You've got a private meeting dining room. They've even allocated for pet friendly, and there's a dog wash station in the basement. These sorts of things set the tone. Whether someone uses the gym or the cinema or not, that's, you'll get a handful of people who just won't, but it sets the kind of barrier in terms of the style of the place and the feel of the place. And it just gives it that exclusivity, and the spaces are good. There's storage units, so all of these things, and landscaping, gardens, then that will get people who are looking to downsize interested. And that's exactly what's happened. Like on at least 4 or 5 occasions up there, I've had people where I said, talk to them, and said, listen, have a look at this. Oh, Walter, I would never buy an apartment. I said, listen, just come up and have a look. Doing the typical sales thing. Just have a look, come up, and it's worked. And the commentary is, okay, this is different, Walter. I wasn't expecting this.
Yeah.
And I think there's a huge gap in the market for this type of development, and all of its knock-ons that it has. It's huge because it frees. It could possibly free up 2 or 3 other properties to get that whole cycle going again.
Yeah, and actually, I think I have to point out to people listening or watching in today, actually, that you are not saying that from a place of bias. I actually went on to your website and went through the images there for Seamount Rise. It is something different. So I understand what you're saying, that actually Irish people have a bias against apartments and apartment living. And I feel that, yes, there's a cultural and kind of historic side of that. But also, I think we need to acknowledge in previous decades, we weren't delivering very good apartment schemes. No. And, I've lived in apartment schemes across Europe, and they had storage, they had community, they had facilities. So it was perfect for somebody coming into an area, whereas in Ireland, we just didn't do that. And actually, when I saw the images on your website, I didn't realize it was an Irish scheme, and that shouldn't be a compliment to the scheme, but unfortunately it is. Now, look, in saying that, we've seen huge improvements over the last number of years, but I think it is worth pointing out that actually Seamount Rise definitely is one of the leaders in the space, and that doesn't surprise me. It's delivered by Ballymore, and Ballymore are absolute best in class, not just in terms of delivering homes, but in terms of placemaking. They understand the concept of place. They understand the people who are going to be living there, whether it's as tenants or owner-occupiers. They understand who's going to be living there and how they choose to live. And I think that's where maybe Malahide is a really interesting market to look at in Dublin, because, yes, it's on the outskirts of a city, but there's very much a village feel. There's very much a strong sense of community. And in terms of, I think we talked about downsizing and right sizing. The reality is there are people who might have a dream to retire to somewhere like Malahide, but I think you've got people living in Malahide whose dream is to downsize and stay in Malahide. So that's a problem when you're attracting new people in, but the people who are there want to stay. And the key to downsizing, and sorry, I need to stop using that term. It really is about right sizing for the different stages of life. But the key to that is being able to move into an appropriate property within your own community. So you're keeping the same pharmacy, the same local pub, the same restaurant, the same dry cleaners, the same family and friends community network that you've built up. And Malahide has not had that. There hasn't been anywhere for people to trade up or down to. And it's great to see some new homes coming into the pipeline there. In terms of secondhand homes, have we any reason to be hopeful that 2024 will bring more new homes to the market, secondhand homes to the market?
Obviously, would love to go that way and be thinking that way. I think it's going to be tight supply this year again. Just for the reasons that many of the houses, people don't have anywhere to go, and can't afford necessarily. Like a perfect example is someone I was speaking to recently, and they have a 4-bedroom detached house. It's probably worth about 850, 900, give or take. Okay, and they won't go to a normal apartment, for example, to downsize. They just won't do it. Now they may not have the funds then to go, and spend 600 or 700 on an apartment, because the difference between their sale and what they're going to purchase doesn't leave them with a huge amount in their back pocket to enjoy the and have a comfortable life and do what they want to do, holidays and enjoy retirement or whatever it may be. So that's where a sticking point is, and this is probably a wider government thing. But if that 650,000 apartment was 450,000, I would say you'd get a huge volume of people looking to do it. But obviously that doesn't make the scheme viable. So that's where there may have to be something there to sort of prop that up in order to free up those houses, because there are dozens of people I've spoken to over the last year or two who, if the pricing and there was other options to go to that were nice and had facilities and had all of those boxes ticked, they would do it. But they're not left with anything money-wise at the end of it. So there needs to be a lot more of these types of schemes around the city in order to facilitate and kickstart that cyclical, 3-bed seller buys the 4-bed downsizes or right sizes, and the whole thing kicks off again. But there is a block there. So they're staying where they are, and all of their neighbours are staying, bar the odd one, are staying where they are. So they're not moving. And we're noticing that in Malahide. And then when one or two do come on, it's frantic because the demand for it is so great. So yeah, I mean, that's a wider issue probably, but that will, if there were more options for people to trade down or downsize to something more specific, then I think that would free the whole market up.
Yeah, and that is a similar situation that we see in other even large market towns. We're seeing that situation. For Malahide, is there an issue in terms of vacancy or dereliction? Are there many vacant buildings, derelict buildings? Very, very few. Maybe the odd commercial unit that for one reason or another has been left. But other than that, in terms of housing, no, absolutely not. In terms of the commercial market, just how are businesses faring? Because part of a thriving community is that the community use the shops, the retail, the coffee shops, the facilities, so that actually you can have a thriving main street. And it's something that I know in Malahide, there's some really interesting placemaking initiatives being touted there, for pedestrianising streets, and some of those have been quite controversial. But the reality is, to sustain a community, you actually need a thriving economic centre. Is that happening in Malahide right now?
I mean, that's one thing that it always had, particularly on the food and beverage end of things. So lots of good restaurants, lots of good bars. There's shopping. So now it's tight. You hear from shop owners and different things that they're being squeezed because rents are high, rates are high. So everyone will have their own opinion, particularly on the pedestrianisation of New Street, which I'm not going to get into because that causes all sorts of drama. But if it's going to be done correctly, which I'm sure it will, I think it will attract. Now, some industries will do better out of that than others. But the more people you're attracting into Malahide, a certain amount of those will go to the restaurants, a certain will do the coffee shops, certain will go into the clothing stores, etc., etc. So I think bringing people in, if it's managed correctly, is only a good thing. It can only be a good thing. And then you've got such a growing population, or a big, Malahide has grown massively. I think it's 17,000 people now, whereas, a good few years ago, it might have been a population of 6 or 7. So it's gone from a village to a town, really. But we're trying to hold on to that village feel.
One of the more recent interviews I did with the business in Malahide was actually when the co-working space on the waterfront opened.
The view, I think.
And absolutely. And that, amenities like that are very important for people who might want to work in a different way. So they're not ready to downsize their lives. They're still working full time, but maybe not full time in the office. What impact has not just co-working, but I suppose the ability to remote work, has that changed the dynamics you're seeing in terms of the demand and the types of people who are coming and looking for homes there?
100%. And again, that's fueling that larger family 4-bedroom home with, kitchen, dining room, possibly. An extra room is becoming critical, and that area of the market is frantic again. So if you have the extra rooms, because maybe both parents are working from home, 2 or 3 kids, every single room is vital. So you'll notice that in properties that have been maybe modernized, extended, extra room added over the garage or garage converted, or et cetera, et cetera. So if a lot of that heavy lifting has been done, and they do have the extra space, so TV room plus a formal kind of living room, open plan kitchen, dining space, and then 4 bedrooms. They may not need the 4 bedrooms, but one will be an office, and then an office in the TV room, whatever, downstairs temporarily. So that's where you have that. That's frantic in terms of interest. Because it has definitely changed. People are at home a lot more. So if you have just an open plan kitchen, living, dining space, and that's it, you have 2 or 3 kids, and it's a playroom, and it's an office, and it's a kitchen, and it's a dining space, you're noticing families looking for that extra room. And where it's been done. And a lot of the older houses in Malahide have that, you see, because they would have had a garage that's converted, or they had a separate dining room. So you've got living, dining, kitchen, TV room, and that's, you can kind of adapt to your own situation if you're at home a lot. And where they've been modernized and have the extra space, that's where you're seeing frantic bidding. And again, as I said earlier, that's where you do need to be up for the fight, because you could have 30, 40, 50 people viewing a house like that. You're inevitably going to have at least 7 or 8 people bidding on it. And that would be fairly typical in that category.
And the buyers you're looking at, because Malahide, just because the marketplace that it is, there are a number of older homes. The buyers that you have that are kind of ready, willing and able, are they willing to look at projects? Are they willing to take on a project, or do they need it shiny and ready to go?
It's interesting. There's 2 different levels. On the premium, in the kind of 1.5 million plus category, where there's deeper pockets. They're more about location and the road that it's on. And they're very happy to spend 1.5 to 2.5 million for the site. They have the financial capability to literally gut the house. And in some cases, you will be left with the front wall, just because they have to retain that of the house. The front of the house is kept. You look behind it, the whole thing is burst out. And obviously that's an expensive thing to do. But on that sort of premium house and location, you're noticing that there's it's a site purchase in many cases as opposed to a house, because they have the means to do what they need to do.
Yeah.
On the other side of it, then you've people looking for your kind of family home who wouldn't have the financial ability to to put a million or 2 million into a refurb. They're the when the heavy lifting has been done in terms of maybe heating upgrade, insulated, extra room, windows, all of that. So if the rating has been improved in terms of energy efficiency, and a lot of, like, the attic may have been converted, the kitchen extended back out, all of those things, where that has been done, again, that's the frantic end of it. And I think people have the capability and the ability to borrow more, so they're kind of pushing themselves on the borrowing as opposed to the deposit saving, because they might have, obviously they'll have the deposit, maybe 10, 15, 20%, whatever it is, but they mightn't necessarily have the other 200,000 or 300,000 that might be required to do a complete refurb in the house. So where that's being done, they're going, okay, we're paying quite a lot here over what maybe sold in the estate 3 or 4 months ago. But if we were to go in there and do that ourselves, the time it would take trying to get someone to do it, obviously the cost of supplies and all that is crazy at the minute. So where that's being done, that's where you're seeing people pushing their bids.
Yeah. So, well, actually, that's really interesting, because I know, going back over the last decade and 2 decades, when speaking with the estate agents, we would have always been very conscious of what a seller should be doing to bring their property to the market. And, there's always an ongoing conversation. There always has been about the works that will actually generate a return on investment, what's important. And actually, I do think that's somewhat cyclical, or there are trends around this, that sometimes buyers are willing to do more than others. And at the moment, certainly the energy performance side of it is a huge thing. So, previously we might have been talking about putting in a new bathroom or a new kitchen or repainting, whereas now actually the energy upgrades are what moves the needle really for sellers. And I think that's a really interesting one. I'm conscious of time, but before we finish up, I'm always trying to understand maybe the trends that will be shaping individual markets as we look to the year ahead. And while we have lots of data around that, I think sometimes the truest indicator is what the would-be sellers tell us. So are you, at this point in January now, are you going in and meeting sellers who are considering putting their property on the market and requesting valuations?
Yes. That is always busy. People are always curious to know, for different reasons, whether they're just curious to know how much their house is worth. But a lot of particularly where I would say, where people are of a retirement age, they're always curious to know. But again, the block for them, and this is where it stops, unfortunately, is where are they going? And a lot of the conversations are, Walter, if I had somewhere to go, I would be gone, and we would obviously try and help them, but that's not for everybody, because it's just a bit of a nervous move for people. So there is a bit of hand holding to be done in that situation, where you just want to try and guide people through. And I often say to sellers as well, listen, the worst thing that can happen is you get your buyer, you can't find something, you don't have to go. You're not the vendor isn't going to the market to mess anybody around. Their intentions are good. They hope it works out. But as I said to them, without making that step, you ain't going to get where you want to go. And if it doesn't work out, you're never going to be left on the streets or homeless. You don't have to move until you find something. And that's a huge mess. And I think people get relaxed when they hear that. They get so caught up and get so worried that what happens if I don't find something? I'll be homeless. You won't. You just don't move. And most buyers will be prepared to wait, because again, supply is so tight that if it takes a little bit more, they're usually okay to wait for that.
Well, then look, for final question, let's hone in on maybe in terms of the supply that could be delivered. We've talked about maybe some of the larger scale developments, but there are still pockets of opportunity for smaller scale developers. So if there's any, maybe smaller scale home builders or developers looking at the marketplace in Malahide, and we're talking about kind of low numbers of units, looking and knowing the demand as you do, what should those smaller scale developers be delivering for Malahide?
Yeah, I mean, if you either go on the high end apartment end of it, which I know is expensive to build, but you will sell if you go high end. I think where if you fall between the stools, if you don't really attack one particular marketplace and you try and keep everybody happy, it doesn't work. You either go like the apartments in Cement Rise, where you go high end and facilities, and that'll fly. If you don't have the space for that, well, then you need to look at maybe what is your unique selling point. Is it the location and everything like that? And any sort of new build house, you're going to do 3-4 bedroom. We could do with hundreds of them. So you're never going to go too far wrong with that. If you can get a dozen 3-bed semis or 4 beds or a mix of both, they're going to absolutely fly, because there's so many young families looking to get into Malahide. And schools is a big thing if it's within the catchment of the primary schools in particular. It's going to fly.
Very good. Okay, look, I think that's you make a very compelling case for Malahide, and to be honest, Malahide makes a very compelling case for Malahide as a destination for home buyers. Just in terms of, because we've mentioned it a lot, Cement Rise, I do recommend that people just go onto your website and take a look at the images there, because they're genuinely stunning. What's the availability like before we get people's hopes up?
So we still have one of our. There's two blocks of the apartments. One is already sold out, and we've got a number of units still available in the second block, although they are selling very well. So 1s and 2 beds. We will have 3-bedroom penthouses coming on in this year. But that again goes into a different category again. But availability now, and we do have also some of the 1-bedroom apartments which fall into the Help to Buy price range, which has been very popular actually. So that's interesting too. So yeah, there's a dedicated website as well, cementrise.com, which you'll see all the information, all the imagery, and we're viewing there every single week. So no problem getting in. There's a dedicated sales suite up there as well to show people. So a mock-up 2-bedroom apartment, and the model is there and everything. So you get a very good feel for what it is you're going to be buying. They're going to start completing around March, April this year into the summer. So they're kind of ready now for anyone within that 6 months mortgage approval period as well. So it's busy.
That's great. Walter, thank you so much for taking the time to take us through the marketplace, because I think, if you're looking at the marketplace in Dublin, sometimes the nuances of, I say villages, but you're right, Malahide is definitely not a village anymore. It's certainly a town, but sometimes the nuances of areas like that can get lost when we talk about averages. So thank you so much for taking us through and kind of helping paint a very good picture of the supply and demand there, and maybe what sellers and buyers can expect for 2024. So thank you so much for that. That was Walter Mythen of O'Farrell Cleere Estate Agents in Malahide. My thanks to producer Katie Tallon and to the production team at Hear Me Roar Media. Also huge thanks to our show sponsor Daft.ie, Ireland's most visited property website. And thank you indeed for tuning in. We'll catch you on the next episode of the Property Roundup here on iPropertyRadio. In the meantime, please be sure to check out all of the other Irish and international real estate and construction shows here on iPropertyRadio.